The dinner rush at Riverside Heights Hotel was louder than usual that night. Crystal glasses clinked, soft piano music floated through the air, and the scent of expensive wine mixed with freshly baked bread. For most people, this place was untouchable luxury. For Elena Carter, it was just another exhausting shift in a life that had never been kind to her. Elena was 27, a waitress with worn shoes and tired eyes, carrying trays heavier than her worries. She had been working double shifts for months, trying to pay off hospital bills left behind after her mother's death. Her father was gone long before that. No safety net, no rich relatives, just grit, patience, and the habit of putting others first, even when she had nothing left to give. That night, the restaurant manager had warned the staff early. "Table 12 is special, very special," he said in a hushed tone. "No mistakes, no delays." Table 12 belonged to Richard Holloway. Everyone knew the name. Billionaire, tech tycoon, media favorite, a man whose companies employed tens of thousands and whose donations funded hospitals, universities, and entire city projects. When he walked into a room, power followed him like a shadow. Dressed in a tailored black suit, silver hair perfectly combed, Richard Holloway looked untouchable, like a man death itself would hesitate to approach. He sat alone, no assistants, no family, just a glass of water and a folded napkin on the table. Elena noticed something was off the moment she approached him. His hand trembled slightly as he lifted the glass. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Sweat beaded along his temple, despite the cool air of the restaurant. "Good evening, sir," Elena said gently, placing the menu in front of him. "Can I get you started with anything?" Richard tried to respond, but the words didn't come out. Instead, his glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble floor. The sound echoed. For half a second, the restaurant froze. Then Richard Holloway grabbed his chest. His face went pale. His lips turned faintly blue. His body stiffened as he collapsed backward in his chair, crashing to the floor. Screams erupted. "Someone call an ambulance!" "Oh my God! Is that Richard Holloway?" Waiters backed away. Guests stood frozen, phones halfway raised, unsure whether to record or help. The manager shouted orders, his voice shaking, but no one moved fast enough. No one, except Elena. Her tray hit the floor as she dropped to her knees beside him. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Years ago, she had worked part-time at a nursing home while studying. She had seen this before. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, leaning close. No response. She checked his breathing, weak, irregular. "Clear the space!" Elena shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. People stared at her, just a waitress, but something in her tone made them step back. Elena placed her hands on Richard's chest and began CPR. 1, 2, 3. Her arms burned, but she didn't stop. She counted under her breath, tears forming in her eyes as she pushed harder, praying she wasn't already too late. "This man cannot die," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Not like this. Not here." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but time was slipping away. And Elena Carter had no idea that this moment, this single act of courage, was about to collide her fragile world with unimaginable power and change her life forever. Elena's hands trembled as she continued CPR, counting each compression with fierce focus. Around her, chaos reigned. A woman near the entrance was crying. A man shouted into his phone, demanding the ambulance hurry. The restaurant manager hovered uselessly, pale and sweating, terrified not just for the man on the floor, but for what this could mean for the hotel's reputation. "Elena, stop!" the manager suddenly snapped, his voice sharp with panic. "You're not a doctor. If something happens—" "If I stop, he dies," Elena shot back without looking up. Her arms ached, her breath came in gasps, but she refused to slow down. She tilted Richard Holloway's head carefully, checking his airway the way she'd been trained years ago, still barely breathing, still no pulse strong enough to reassure her. She leaned closer, listening to his chest. That's when she noticed it, something subtle, something everyone else had missed. A small medical bracelet, half hidden beneath his cuff. Elena brushed the sleeve back just enough to read it. Severe heart condition. Nitroglycerin. Immediate use. Allergic to morphine. Her heart jumped. "Does anyone know where his medication is?" she called out. Silence. Then a man near the bar hesitated. I saw him take something out of his pocket earlier, maybe when he sat down." Elena searched quickly, patting Richard's jacket with shaking hands until her fingers closed around a small silver case. Inside were pills and a tiny spray bottle. Nitroglycerin. Relief surged through her, but it was followed instantly by fear. She wasn't authorized to do this. If she made a mistake, if the dosage was wrong, she could lose her job. Worse, she could face charges. The manager knew it too. "Elena, don't!" he shouted. "You'll destroy us if you mess this up." For a split second, doubt crept in. She saw herself being fired, sued, blamed. A poor waitress taking responsibility for a billionaire's death. But then Richard's body convulsed slightly, and a weak choking sound escaped his throat. That sound shattered her hesitation. "I'm not letting him die because I was scared," Elena said quietly. She administered the spray exactly as she remembered from training, praying she still remembered everything correctly. She continued CPR, counting again, her arms burning, her vision blurring with tears. Seconds felt like hours. Then, something changed. Richard coughed violently. A collective gasp swept through the room. His chest rose, deeper this time. His fingers twitched. Color slowly returned to his face. "He's breathing," someone cried. Elena let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, but she stayed where she was, supporting him, whispering softly, "You're okay, sir. Stay with me. Help is coming." Richard's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then slowly locking onto her face. He tried to speak, but she gently stopped him. "Don't talk. Just breathe." Sirens grew louder. Paramedics burst through the doors moments later, pushing through the stunned crowd. They took over immediately, hooking Richard to monitors, lifting him onto a stretcher. One of them turned to Elena. "Who administered the nitro?" "I did," she admitted, bracing herself. The paramedic studied the readings, then nodded. "You saved his life." The words hit her like a wave. Around them, whispers exploded. "She saved him. That's Richard Holloway. A waitress did that." The manager stared at her in shock, not anger now, but disbelief. As they wheeled Richard away, he reached out weakly and grabbed Elena's wrist. His grip was surprisingly firm. "Don't leave," he murmured. Elena swallowed hard. "You'll be okay. Just focus on breathing." But his eyes stayed on her, filled with something deeper than gratitude, recognition, curiosity, and a question he hadn't yet asked. Elena watched the stretcher disappear through the doors, unaware that the man she had just saved would soon uncover the truth about her life, and make a decision that would change everything she thought she knew about her future. Elena didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Richard Holloway's face, ashen and still on the restaurant floor, then slowly returning to life beneath her hands. The sounds replayed endlessly, the manager shouting, the gasps from the crowd, the sirens cutting through the night. By morning, exhaustion clung to her like a weight. She dragged herself back to the hotel for her shift, half expecting to be fired the moment she stepped inside. The manager called her into his office before she could even tie her apron. Her stomach dropped. He didn't shout. That frightened her more. He folded his hands on the desk, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. "Do you have any idea who that man was?" "Yes," Elena said quietly. "But that didn't matter." He exhaled sharply. "It matters to us. That was Richard Holloway, one of the most powerful men in the city. If anything had gone wrong—" "But it didn't," she said, meeting his eyes, "because I didn't let it." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, surprisingly, his shoulders sagged. "The hospital called," he admitted. "They confirmed what the paramedic said. You made the right call." Relief flickered through her, but it was short-lived. They also said, he continued, that Mr. Holloway personally asked for your name. Elena's heart skipped. Why? She whispered. The manager shook his head. I don't know, but there's more. He slid a business card across the desk, thick paper, embossed lettering. Holloway Enterprises Executive Office. They want you at the hospital. Today. Elena stared at the card, her hands trembling. Am I in trouble? If you were, he said slowly, they wouldn't ask politely. The hospital room was nothing like Elena expected. No chaos, no machines beeping frantically, just quiet luxury, fresh flowers, a private nurse, and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. Richard Holloway looked different now, stronger, color in his face, but his eyes sharpened the moment she stepped inside. That's her, he said to the woman standing beside his bed. The woman turned. She was elegant, composed, clearly someone used to power. This is my daughter Claire, Richard said, Chief Legal Officer of Holloway Enterprises. Elena froze. A lawyer. Great. Claire's gaze was piercing, analytical. You administered medication without authorization. Yes, Elena said softly, because waiting would have killed him. A tense silence followed. Then Richard laughed, a low, raspy sound that startled everyone. She argues exactly like her, he said. Claire frowned. Like who? My wife, he replied, his voice softening. God rest her soul. He gestured for Elena to come closer. Sit, please. Elena perched on the edge of a chair, nerves buzzing. I've had doctors, executives, and politicians begging for my attention since yesterday, Richard said. But I told them all to wait, because there's something I need to understand. He leaned forward. Why did you risk everything for a stranger? Elena hesitated, then answered honestly. Because once, someone didn't risk anything for me. The room fell quiet. Richard's eyes darkened. Explain, she swallowed. My father collapsed at work when I was 19. People stood around arguing about liability. No one touched him until it was too late. Claire's expression softened despite herself. So when I saw you, Elena continued, I didn't see a billionaire. I saw a man running out of time. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they glistened. I've built companies worth billions, he said quietly. But yesterday, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was that you chose courage over fear. He turned to Claire. Did we run a background check? Yes, she said. Basic employment history. Community college. Former nursing student. Elena stiffened. You never finished, Claire added. No, Elena said. I couldn't afford it after my father died. Richard studied her carefully. So you knew exactly what to do and chose to use it. Yes, he smiled faintly. That makes you dangerous. Her breath caught. I'm sorry? Dangerous, he repeated, to a world that prefers people stay silent and obedient. He nodded toward Claire. Offer her the seat. Claire hesitated. Which one? The scholarship, Richard said firmly. And the job. Elena's head spun. I don't understand. Richard's gaze locked onto hers. I don't reward loyalty to power. I reward loyalty to life. Claire sighed, then looked at Elena. Mr. Holloway is funding the completion of your medical training. In return, he wants you as part of his private medical response team. Elena's vision blurred. Why me? Richard's voice was steady. Because when my life was in your hands, you didn't ask who I was. Tears spilled freely now. But understand this, he added, his tone shifting. This invitation comes with scrutiny. The world will question you. They'll dig into your past. They'll test your integrity. He held her gaze. Can you handle that? Elena wiped her tears and straightened her back. Yes, she said, because I already have. Richard smiled, not like a billionaire, but like a man who had just found hope where he least expected it. And as Elena left the hospital that day, she had no idea that this opportunity would soon pull her into a battle between power greed, and loyalty. One that would force Richard Holloway to make a decision far more personal than any business deal he'd ever signed. Elena thought the hardest part was over. She was wrong. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, her life no longer felt like her own. Everything moved fast, too fast. Lawyers, doctors, background checks, paperwork thicker than any textbook she'd ever owned. Holloway Enterprises didn't just open doors, it ripped them off their hinges. Yet beneath the opportunity, Elena felt something else. Tension. She noticed it first in Claire's silences. The way meetings stopped when she entered the room. The looks exchanged between executives when Richard mentioned her name. She wasn't just a waitress anymore, she was a variable. The first warning came from an unexpected place. George, the old waiter from the hotel, called her late one night. "Kid," he said, voice low, "you need to be careful." Elena's stomach tightened. "Careful of what?" "Power," he replied. "I've seen rich men do generous things, and I've seen them destroy people who know too much." "I don't know anything," Elena said. George exhaled. "That's what scares me. Because it looks like they think you might." The next morning, Claire summoned Elena to the executive floor. The room overlooked the entire city, glass walls, marble floors, silence so thick it pressed against the chest. Claire didn't waste time. "There's something my father hasn't told you," she said, "and I think you deserve to hear it from me before someone else twists it." Elena sat slowly. "Okay." Claire folded her hands. "My mother didn't die of natural causes." Elena's breath caught. "What?" "She collapsed during a charity gala 12 years ago," Claire continued. "Officially, it was listed as heart failure." "But," Elena whispered. "But my father believes she could have survived," Claire said, "if someone had acted faster." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. "She collapsed just like him," Claire said. "Crowded room, plenty of doctors present, no one touched her." "Why?" Elena asked, barely breathing. "Because she was Victoria Holloway," Claire said bitterly, "and no one wanted the responsibility if something went wrong." Elena's hands clenched. "She died surrounded by people who were afraid of consequences," Claire said. "That's the truth my father never got over." Suddenly, everything made sense. Why Richard looked at Elena the way he did. Why her courage shook him. Why this wasn't charity. That evening, Richard asked Elena to walk with him in the hospital garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised gold and purple. "You remind me of her," he said suddenly. Elena stopped. "Your wife?" "Yes," he replied. "She hated hesitation. She believed indecision was its own kind of cruelty." He turned to her. "When you saved me, I didn't just see skill. I saw the moment my wife was denied." Elena swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." "So am I," he said quietly. "Every day." They walked in silence for a while before Richard spoke again. "Do you know why I built such an aggressive empire?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "Because fear runs the world," he said. "And I wanted to be the one people feared, so my family never would." He stopped and faced her. "But fear cost me my wife." A sharp pain crossed his face. "And now," he continued, "I see my board growing nervous, because they know I'm changing." Elena frowned. "Changing how?" "By trusting someone with no money, no influence, and no reason to lie." He smiled faintly. "That terrifies them." The attack came sooner than Elena expected. The next morning, headlines exploded across financial media. Billionaire risked life due to unqualified waitress Holloway empire faces. Lawsuit over medical negligence. Paparazzi waited outside her apartment. Comment sections shredded her apart. A nobody, a gold digger, a liability. Elena's phone rang nonstop. Finally, Claire called. "They're trying to force my father into stepping down," she said. "They're using you as the excuse." Elena's chest tightened. "I never wanted this." "I know," Claire replied softly. "But now, you're the center of it." Elena stared at the city below her window. the same city that once ignored her existence. "What do I do?" she asked. Claire was quiet for a moment. "Decide," she said, "whether you're willing to stand in the light or walk away and let them rewrite the truth." Elena closed her eyes. She thought of her father, of the people who did nothing, of the man who lived because she did. She opened her eyes. "Tell them," Elena said, her voice steady, "I'm not going anywhere." And at that moment, far above boardrooms and bank accounts, a battle began, one that would force Richard Holloway to choose between the empire he built with fear and the legacy he could build with truth. The boardroom was silent. Not the polite, professional kind of silence, but the dangerous kind, where power shifts and everyone feels it happening. Elena stood at the far end of the long glass table, hands folded, shoulders straight. Cameras waited outside the building. Lawyers filled the seats along the walls. 12 board members stared at her like judges. Richard Holloway hadn't arrived yet. They wanted to break her before he did. "Miss Elena Ruiz," the lead board member began, his tone sharp with practiced authority. "Your actions placed our CEO in significant medical risk. Regardless of intention, this company cannot afford emotional decision-making." Elena lifted her chin. "I didn't make an emotional decision." A ripple of murmurs spread. "I made a medical one," she continued calmly. "Based on training I received before I ever served a single cup of coffee." That caught their attention. "You were not licensed at the time," another member snapped. "No," Elena agreed, "because my father died before I could finish school." The room stilled. "He collapsed at a construction site," she said. "People stood around him, educated people, important people. They waited for permission. He died waiting." She looked each of them in the eye. "I decided I would never be one of them." The doors opened. Richard Holloway walked in. No entourage, no lawyers, just him. He took his seat at the head of the table and said one word: "Proceed." The lead board member turned quickly. "Richard, we're discussing a serious liability. Public trust?" "I know exactly what you're discussing," Richard said calmly. "You're discussing fear." He turned to Elena. "Continue." She took a breath. "When Mr. Holloway collapsed, the room froze," she said. "Because wealth makes people afraid to act, afraid to fail, afraid to be blamed." She paused. "I wasn't afraid. Because I had nothing to lose." The board shifted uncomfortably. "And because of that," she finished, "he lived." One of the lawyers stood. "Even if that's true, public perception is a lie," Richard interrupted. He pressed a button on the table. Screens lit up around the room. Security footage. The moment Elena acted, the moment others hesitated, the exact second Richard's heart stabilized. The timestamps didn't lie. "Every second of delay," Richard said, voice steel hard, "would have killed me." Silence crashed down. The lead board member cleared his throat. "Richard, the shareholders—" "I am the majority shareholder," Richard replied. A sharp inhale spread across the room. "And today," he continued, "I'm dissolving the executive medical policy that prioritizes reputation over response." He turned to Elena. "Effective immediately, Elena Ruiz is appointed Director of Emergency Preparedness across all Holloway properties." Gasps. "She will design protocols ensuring no one, employee or guest, dies because people are afraid to act." The board erupted. "You can't—" "I just did." Outside, the headlines changed. Billionaire exposes deadly culture of fear. Waitress becomes executive after saving CEO. But inside the building, something quieter and far more powerful happened. Richard approached Elena. "You could have walked away," he said softly. "I almost did," she admitted. He nodded. "Thank you for staying." Claire joined them, eyes shining. "You didn't just save my father," she said. "You saved the truth." Weeks later, Elena stood in a new uniform. Not a waitress's apron, not a suit that felt borrowed. Something that fit. At the opening of a new Holloway-funded emergency training center, Richard spoke to the press. "We spent years teaching people to protect power," he said. "Elena taught us to protect life." Elena watched from the side, overwhelmed. She hadn't planned to change the world. She had only refused to look away. And somehow, that was enough. Because sometimes the smallest act of courage doesn't just save a life. It rewrites an empire. 6 months later, the restaurant no longer smelled of burnt coffee and quiet desperation. It smelled like new beginnings. Elena stood near the window of the same place where her life had once felt so small. The diner had been renovated, but she'd insisted they keep one thing unchanged: the corner table where everything began. Across the street, a crowd gathered. Cameras flashed. But this time, Elena wasn't hiding behind a counter. Richard Holloway stepped up to the podium outside the diner, his voice steady but emotional. "People think power lives in boardrooms," he said. "They think it wears suits and signs contracts." He turned slightly, looking at Elena. "I learned the truth on the floor of a restaurant when a woman with no title chose courage over fear." Applause broke out. Richard raised his hand. "Today we open the first of many Holloway Life Response Centers, free emergency training for workers, families, anyone willing to learn how to act when seconds matter." He paused. "And this building," he added, "is named after the person who reminded us what responsibility really means." The sign behind him was unveiled. The Elena Ruiz Center for Life Response. Elena felt her breath catch. Later, inside, Claire hugged her tightly. "You changed my dad," she whispered. "He listens now, to people, to silence." Elena smiled softly. "He always had it in him." Claire shook her head. "No, he needed someone brave enough to wake him up." That evening, Elena walked home alone, not because she was lonely, but because she wanted to feel the quiet. She passed a construction site and stopped. Men laughed loudly, tired and dusty, taking a break. One of them collapsed. For half a second, the world froze. Then 3 people moved at once. Someone checked breathing. Someone called emergency services. Someone cleared space. Elena watched from a distance, heart pounding. He survived. Not because she stepped in, but because others did. That night, Elena wrote a single line in her journal. "Real change isn't when they clap for you. It's when they don't need you anymore." She closed the book. Her phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "You didn't just save my life. You gave it purpose." Elena looked out the window at the city lights. She was no longer a waitress, no longer invisible, no longer afraid of having nothing to lose, because now she knew the truth. The greatest power isn't money. It's the courage to act when everyone else is too afraid to move.